Ip Man. On December 2nd, 1972, 79-year-old Ip Man died in his Hong Kong apartment. Ip Man had spent decades teaching Wing Chun Kung Fu, eventually becoming world famous as Bruce Lee's teacher. By 1972, he'd established Wing Chun internationally and trained thousands of students. However, Ip Man's life had been far more complicated than the heroic portrayal in later films. He'd struggled with opium addiction for many years. Opium smoking was common in early 20th century China, but Ip Man's habit had been severe and long-lasting. The chronic opium use had damaged Ip Man's health significantly. By the early 1970s, he'd developed throat cancer. The cancer was likely connected to decades of smoking opium through pipes. His condition deteriorated through 1972. On December 2nd, Ip Man died in his apartment from the throat cancer. He was 79 years old. His funeral was attended by hundreds of students and martial artists. Bruce Lee, Ip Man's most famous student, did not attend. Lee had moved to America years earlier and had complicated feelings about his relationship with his teacher. The films depicting Ip Man's life, released decades later, largely omitted his opium addiction and presented a sanitized version of his story. The real Ip Man had been a skilled martial artist, but also a flawed human who struggled with addiction. Brandon Lee. On March 31st, 1993, 28-year-old Brandon Lee was filming a scene for The Crow at Carolco Studios in Wilmington, North Carolina. Lee, son of Bruce Lee, had spent years building his own martial arts and acting career. The Crow was supposed to be his breakthrough film, finally establishing him as a star independent of his father's legacy. The scene being filmed involved Lee's character being shot. Actor Michael Massey would fire a .44 Magnum revolver loaded with blank cartridges at Lee from about 15 feet away. The production was running behind schedule and over budget, leading to shortcuts in safety procedures. Earlier in the production, the prop department had created dummy rounds for close-up shots of the revolver. These dummy rounds looked real, but had the gunpowder removed. However, they still contained live primers and bullets. When one dummy round was fired in the gun, the primer ignited with enough force to lodge the bullet tip in the barrel. No one noticed. Later, the same gun was loaded with blank rounds for the shooting scene. Blank rounds contained gunpowder to create a flash and sound, but no bullet. However, the bullet fragment from the earlier dummy round was still stuck in the barrel. At 12:30 a.m., the cameras rolled. Massey fired the revolver at Lee as scripted. The blank's gunpowder charge pushed the lodged bullet fragment out of the barrel with lethal velocity. The fragment struck Lee in the abdomen, penetrating his spine. Lee fell but didn't immediately realize how seriously he was injured. The crew initially thought he was still acting. When they realized he'd actually been shot, they called for medical help. Lee was rushed to New Hanover Regional Medical Center. Surgeons operated for 5 hours, but the damage was too severe. Brandon Lee died at 1:04 p.m. on March 31st, 1993. He would have been filming for just a few more weeks to complete The Crow. The death cemented the Lee family curse legend in popular